Welcome to the deep dive.
Hello, everyone.
I'm so thrilled you are joining us today because the story we have in front of us is just an absolute masterpiece of deception.
It really is.
Imagine you are sitting in this quiet, sun-drenched country estate, right? Completely insulated from the chaos of the outside world.
A total bubble.
Exactly. You are having tea, you're making polite conversation, maybe playing croquet on the lawn, but slowly you begin to realize that the people sitting around that tea table with you are harboring secrets so incredibly dark they're actively erupting into murder.
Which is such a chilling thought.
That is the situation we are stepping into today. We are looking at a massive, fascinating stack of sources.
And we have quite the variety of sources today.
We really do. We've got firsthand journal entries, personal notes, detailed architectural blueprints of a manor house, and even early 20th century chemical prescriptions.
Very detailed prescriptions.
Right. And these documents were all compiled by a man named Captain Arthur Hastings. They actually formed the foundational source material for what would eventually become the legendary book, The Mysterious Affair at Styles by Agatha Christie.
An absolute classic.
But listen, we aren't here to just read a summary of a classic novel. That's not what we do.
No, definitely not.
We are going to use these original source materials to dissect a real, living, breathing puzzle. We are going to examine the exact chemical composition of Edwardian medicines.
Which is wild, by the way.
Oh, totally. We're going to reconstruct the architectural layout of a seemingly impossible locked room crime scene, and we are going to sift through the intense psychological wreckage of a deeply divided, desperately unhappy family.
And our mission for this deep dive is essentially threefold. First, we are going to reconstruct the anatomy of this crime, minute by minute, step by step, right down to the microscopic details of forced locks and shattered porcelain.
The tiny things.
Exactly. Second, we will explore the underlying psychology of a household that functions essentially as a powder keg just waiting for a match.
Waiting to explode.
And third, we are going to uncover how the legendary detective Hercule Poirot utilizes strict meticulous order and just this profound understanding of human nature to cut through a dense, deliberate fog of brilliant red herrings.
It is a study in how to separate signal from noise.
Yeah.
Especially when every single piece of data seems to be pointing you in the wrong direction.
A perfect storm of misinformation.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because we absolutely have to start by setting the scene and meeting this incredibly complex cast of characters. We need to understand the environment that allowed a murder like this to incubate.
The setting is absolutely crucial here.
It is. The setting is July 1917. We are right in the middle of the Great War, but the location of our sources is a place called Styles Court.
In Essex.
Right in Essex. It's this flat, green, sprawling country estate. Now, Captain Hastings, who compiled these notes, he has actually been invalided home from the front. He has seen the horrors of trench warfare, and when he arrives at Styles, he writes about how it feels like he has crossed a boundary into another universe.
The contrast is massive for him.
Huge. The war seems a million miles away to him. There are maids, there are gardeners, there are lavish meals. But the peace is entirely an illusion.
A complete facade.
At the absolute center of this estate, controlling every single aspect of it, is Mrs. Emily Inglethorp. She is a wealthy, autocratic woman in her 70s. She is the one who holds the purse strings.
She has all the power.
All of it. She inherited the estate and the bulk of the income from her late husband, Mr. Cavendish. And she's recently done something that has thrown this entire fragile ecosystem into absolute chaos.
She got married.
She married a man 20 years her junior named Alfred Inglethorp.
And the introduction of Alfred Inglethorp is the catalyst that destabilizes the entire house.
Without a doubt.
Hastings describes him in the sources with intense distaste. I mean, Alfred is depicted as having this long, extremely black beard, wearing patent leather boots, regardless of the rural weather.
Who wears patent leather in the country?
Exactly. And he possesses this curious impassivity of feature. He is excessively deferential to Emily, always jumping up to fetch her cushions, playing the devoted, doting husband to a woman 2 decades his senior.
But no one else buys it, right?
Not at all. The rest of the household views him with deep, undisguised suspicion. He strikes a totally alien note in this traditional English country house.
Yeah, you can feel the friction.
And to understand that friction, you really have to look at the financial and emotional dynamic he has disrupted. Before Alfred arrived, the power structure was clear, even if it was uncomfortable.
All right, let's talk about the dependents.
You have John Cavendish, Emily's stepson. He is a squarish 45-year-old traditional country squire. He is technically next in line to inherit the estate, but currently he is severely financially strapped.
Which is crazy for a squire.
He lives at style simply because the allowance his stepmother gives him isn't enough to maintain a home of his own.
Just imagine the psychological toll of that. You are a 45-year-old man, married supposedly the lord of the manor in waiting, but you have to ask your 70-year-old stepmother for pocket money.
It's humiliating.
And she can threaten to cut you off at any single moment.
The resentment is palpable in the source texts. And John isn't the only one in this position. There is his younger brother, Lawrence Cavendish.
The poet.
Right, Lawrence is a delicate, nervous former medical student. He actually gave up medicine to write poetry, a poetry that notably does not sell.
At all.
So both of these grown men in their 40s are entirely dependent on the financial whims of Emily. And suddenly, into this precarious financial arrangement steps a brand new husband who is 20 years younger than their stepmother.
A huge threat.
A husband who could easily inherit everything they had been waiting their entire lives for.
The motives are just everywhere. And then we have the outsiders who have been brought into this suffocating, claustrophobic environment. There's Mary Cavendish, John's wife.
She's a very striking figure.
She is. Hastings is immediately captivated by her, and his notes describe her as having a vivid sense of slumbering fire with tawny eyes and an intense power of stillness.
Very poetic.
She is deeply enigmatic, and you get the sense she is profoundly unhappy in this marriage and in this house. Then there is Cynthia Murdoch. She is an orphan protege of Emily's. Since it is wartime, Cynthia works as a dispenser in a nearby Red Cross hospital.
Dealing with medicines and chemicals on a daily basis, which is a huge detail.
Keep that in mind for sure. And finally, rounding out the inner circle, we have a woman named Evelyn Howard.
Evelyn Howard is a fascinating psychological study. The sources describe her as Emily's companion, her factotum, and her jack-of-all-trades.
A factotum, that's a great word.
For anyone unfamiliar with the term, a factotum is someone employed to do all kinds of work. Essentially a personal assistant who handles every aspect of their employer's life.
They run everything.
Evelyn is a pleasant-looking woman of about 40, but she has a loud, almost manly voice, a very sturdy build, and she absolutely does not mince her words. In fact, her defining characteristic in these early notes is that she vehemently, passionately hates Alfred Inglethorp.
She doesn't just dislike him quietly. She is broadcasting her hatred to anyone who will listen. The household is essentially a pressure cooker.
Everyone is stressed.
Everyone needs Emily's money. Everyone resents her control, and everyone is terrified of what Alfred's presence means for their future. And this tension snaps almost immediately in the source material.
It doesn't take long.
Evelyn Howard actually packs her bags and leaves Styles Court after having a massive screaming argument with Emily specifically about Alfred. But before she walks out the door, she pulls Hastings aside and gives him a chilling warning.
What does she say?
She tells him that man would as soon murder you in your bed as look at you. He's a bad lot. She begs Hastings to keep his eyes open, explicitly stating that the people in this house are a lot of sharks just circling to get money out of Emily.
When you have a wealthy matriarch controlling the lives of deeply resentful dependents, and you introduce a highly suspicious, significantly younger new husband into the mix, violence is almost an inevitability.
It's bound to happen.
The structural conditions for a crime are perfectly aligned. And it's in this incredibly tense environment that Hastings has a serendipitous encounter at the village post office. He runs into an old friend from Belgium, Hercule Poirot.
The physical description of Poirot in these sources is iconic, and it's so important to how people perceive him. He is a quirky little man, hardly more than 5 feet 4 inches tall, but he carries himself with this immense, unshakable dignity. He demands respect. His head is exactly the shape of an egg, and he has a habit of perching it a little on one side like a bird. He has a stiff military mustache that he takes immense pride in, and he is absolutely obsessed with neatness.
To a fault, really.
Hastings notes that a speck of dust on Poirot's clothing would cause him more pain than a physical bullet wound.
That is quite the image.
But beneath this fastidious, somewhat comical exterior is a razor-sharp intellect. Poirot was one of the most celebrated members of the Belgian police, famous for his extraordinary flair and his unwavering belief that all good detective work is simply a matter of strict method and order.
Poirot's presence in this small English village is a crucial historical detail that really grounds the source material. It's 1914 to 1917. Following the invasion of Belgium, approximately 250,000 Belgian refugees fled to Britain.
A massive displacement.
It was one of the largest refugee movements in British history. Emily Inglethorp, playing the role of the charitable Lady Bountiful, has kindly provided a local cottage for Poirot and 6 of his fellow Belgian refugees.
There's a connection there.
This establishes a profound debt of gratitude that Poirot feels toward her. He points out early in the notes that while Emily might not be passionately loved by her family, he respects her immense generosity.
Right, he owes her.
This gives Poirot an objective outsider perspective. He isn't entangled in the family's financial squabbles, but he has a deep personal motivation to see justice done for the woman who gave him sanctuary.
That's a powerful combination.
This combination of emotional distance and personal loyalty makes him the perfect instrument to dissect the chaos that is about to unfold.
And that simmering tension finally boils over on the afternoon of Monday, July 16th. The sources detail raised voices, a bitter, vicious quarrel happening behind closed doors between Emily and someone else.
A huge fight.
A palpable sense of impending doom hanging over the dinner table, all of which leads directly into the night of the tragedy.
The timeline of that night is critical to unpack. It begins in the deepest part of the night, close to 5 a.m., just as the early summer daylight is starting to break.
The worst time to be woken up.
Hastings is awakened abruptly by a completely terrified Lawrence Cavendish. Emily Inglethorp is locked inside her bedroom, and she is suffering from violent, terrifying convulsions.
The panic captured in Hastings' notes here is visceral. You can feel the adrenaline. John and Lawrence are standing in the hallway, practically paralyzed with indecision.
They don't know what to do.
They rattle the door handle, but it's bolted solidly from the inside. They try to find an alternate route by going through Alfred Inglethorpe's room, which has a connecting door to Emily's, but that door is also locked from the inside.
Another locked door.
And in a detail that immediately sets off alarm bells, Alfred is nowhere to be found. His bed hasn't been slept in at all.
Very suspicious.
Finally realizing they have no other choice, the men have to physically throw their weight against the heavy wooden door and smash it off its hinges to get into her room.
When they finally break in, the medical scene they encounter is horrific. The convulsions Emily is experiencing are so violent that her entire body arches backward until she is resting only on her head and her heels.
That sounds unnatural.
Dr. Bauerstein, a local toxicologist who happens to be out for an early morning walk and rushes into the house when he hears the commotion, later identifies this specific physical reaction. He calls it tetanic in character.
For those of us who aren't toxicologists, what does that actually look like? Because the way it's described in the text sounds like something out of a horror movie.
It really is. It's a direct reference to the symptoms of tetanus, specifically a condition called opisotnos.
Opisotnos, okay.
This happens when a neurotoxin, in this case strychnine, attacks the central nervous system.
Yeah.
It essentially blocks the inhibitory neurotransmitter.
So the muscles can't relax.
Exactly. Without those inhibitors, the muscles contract relentlessly and violently without any ability to relax. The back muscles are stronger than the abdominal muscles, which is why the body arches backward so severely.
Are they aware of what's happening?
Unfortunately, yes. The victim is entirely conscious throughout this process, experiencing excruciating pain and an inability to breathe properly. It is a terrifying way to die. And just before the final fatal convulsion subsides and she falls back motionless on the pillows, Emily Inglethorp manages to cry out her husband's name.
She says Alfred.
Yes, Alfred.
It is the ultimate locked room mystery setup. A wealthy woman dies with her husband's name on her lips, locked in a bedroom from the inside, while the husband is mysteriously missing.
It looks so obvious.
When Poirot is officially called in by Hastings to investigate, his approach is so completely different from the local police or even Hastings himself. Hastings is looking at the big picture, the screaming, the smashed door, the obvious drama.
He's caught up in the emotion.
But Poirot, he walks into that chaotic room and darts around like a bird looking at the floor, the walls, the furniture, focusing on things that Hastings thinks are completely, utterly irrelevant.
What's fascinating here is where Poirot's methodology really begins to distance him from the average observer. He meticulously catalogs 6 distinct points of interest in that locked room.
6 clues.
6 physical clues that at first glance seem entirely disconnected from a death by poisoning. First, he finds a coffee cup that hasn't just been dropped, but has been ground into absolute powder on the floor.
Not just broken, but ground up.
Pulverized. Second, he notices a purple dispatch case on Emily's writing table. Its lock has been brutally forced open, and strangely, the key is sitting right there in the lock of the door.
Okay, that's weird.
Third, there is a fresh, damp stain on the carpet near the window that smells strongly of coffee. Fourth, he plucks a tiny fragment of dark green fabric caught in the bolt of the connecting door leading to Cynthia's room.
The green thread.
Fifth, there is a large noticeable splash of white candle grease on the floor. And sixth, he finds an empty box of sleeping powders in the washstand drawer, which notably lacks a chemist's name on the printed label.
Hastings' reaction to this is so telling. He literally watches Poirot examine the crushed coffee cup and tells him basically someone must have just stepped on it in the confusion of breaking down the door. It doesn't mean anything.
He completely dismisses it.
He does. But Poirot gives him this stern lecture. He says, beware. Peril to the detective who says it is so small it does not matter. That way lies confusion. Everything matters.
That is the core of Poirot.
Poirot points out a crucial physical detail. A heavy porcelain coffee cup isn't reduced to fine powder just by someone accidentally stepping on it once. It was deliberately and repeatedly ground into the floor by someone who desperately wanted to destroy it.
While Poirot is focusing on these microscopic anomalies, the macro narrative, the obvious story, is pulling the local police, the family, and Hastings in a very specific, undeniable direction.
Towards Alfred.
Exactly. The immediate assumption made by everyone looking at the surface facts is that the husband Alfred must be the murderer.
Yeah, it just makes sense.
He had the overwhelming financial motive to inherit her estate. He was suspiciously absent from the house that entire night with no clear alibi, and his dying wife gasped his name in her final moments.
It feels like an open and shut case. You hear a dying woman say Alfred, and you immediately assume she is pointing the finger at her killer. It's human nature to connect those two dots.
But this is where critical thinking and the resistance to confirmation bias become essential. Poirot challenges Hastings to reevaluate that assumption. He asks, was she accusing him or was she appealing to him?
Right, calling out for help.
In her dim, agonizing, oxygen-deprived state, in a room lit only by a faint lamp, could she have mistaken someone else for him? Dr. Bauerstein, for instance, is similar in height and build to Alfred, and he also wears a dark beard.
Oh, wow.
If we accept the most sensational interpretation of her final words without questioning it, we blind ourselves to the structural evidence. We have to look at the mechanics of the crime, not just the drama.
And when you actually look at the mechanics, the structural evidence is completely baffling. It defies logic.
It really does defy logic initially. The bizarre biological timeline of the poison itself is key. The local toxicologist confirms it is strychnine.
A very nasty poison.
As Poirot points out, strychnine is a fast-acting poison. Once ingested, its horrific effects should be felt very soon, almost certainly within an hour.
Okay, an hour max.
But here is the timeline we have from the household. Mrs. Inglethorp drank her evening coffee around 8 p.m. The violent symptoms didn't manifest themselves until 5 a.m. the next morning.
That's a huge gap.
That is a staggering delay of 9 hours. How is it biologically possible for a rapidly fatal poison to lay completely dormant in a woman's system for 9 hours before suddenly striking?
It shouldn't be possible.
That single glaring discrepancy in the timeline is the thread that Poirot grabs hold of to unravel the entire case.
It makes no sense. Because initially, everyone, including the police, assumes the poison was slipped into her coffee after dinner. It's the classic trope, right? The poisoned coffee cup.
Very Agatha Christie.
But Poirot uses the physical evidence in the room to prove that the coffee wasn't the delivery mechanism at all. And the way he proves it is through that little damp stain on the carpet and the shattered cup.
The cup Hastings ignored.
Right. Poirot deduces that the coffee was never drunk. Mrs. Inglethorp was in a heightened state of distress from the afternoon's argument. She set her cup down blindly on a wobbly table next to her chair. It spilled entirely onto the floor, creating the damp stain, and someone else came in later and crushed the empty cup to hide the fact that the coffee was completely harmless.
The logic is unassailable. If the coffee was poisoned, the killer would want the cup left intact to look like a normal evening drink, or perhaps washed to remove traces.
That makes perfect sense.
But to crush it to powder suggests someone thought the coffee was poisoned and wanted to protect the person who poured it. So if the strychnine wasn't in the coffee at 8 p.m., how was it delivered?
This is the big question.
This brings us to the fascinating and frankly terrifying chemical engineering of the murder. The poison wasn't simply slipped into a drink under the cover of darkness on the night of her death.
It wasn't sneaked in.
It was already there, hidden in plain sight, sitting openly in her bedroom in her daily medicine.
The chemistry behind this is brilliant, and it ties directly into the author's real-life background. Agatha Christie wasn't just guessing about poisons.
She really knew her stuff.
During World War I, she worked in a hospital dispensary in Turkey. She actually passed complex examinations to become a qualified apothecary's assistant.
A trained professional.
So when she writes about the chemical interactions in these sources, she is writing from a place of intense professional expertise. The setup is this: Dr. Wilkins, Emily's well-meaning but somewhat bumbling physician, had prescribed a daily tonic for her to help with her general fatigue.
A standard Edwardian tonic.
And one of the active ingredients of this tonic was a very small, completely medically safe dose of strychnine sulfate.
It sounds shocking to modern ears, but in the early 20th century, strychnine was indeed occasionally utilized in very minute doses as a stimulant.
Really?
Oh yes, often prescribed for elderly patients to supposedly invigorate the nervous system. The prescription, as written by Dr. Wilkins and prepared by the chemist, was perfectly safe.
So it wasn't a mistake by the doctor?
No, not at all. However, the murderer recognized a lethal vulnerability in the chemistry and utilized a brilliant trick. They obtained a completely different, very common medication, bromide powders,
Okay.
and they covertly added them to the full bottle of the strychnine tonic.
Wait, if the doctor prescribed the strychnine tonic, how does adding bromide turn a safe medicine into a murder weapon? What does the bromide actually do to the solution?
Bromide was widely used in the Edwardian era as a mild sedative or nerve tonic, particularly for women suffering from anxiety or sleeplessness.
But pretty common.
On its own, it is relatively harmless, but when bromide is introduced into a liquid solution containing strychnine sulfate, it causes a drastic chemical reaction.
What happens?
It forces the strychnine to precipitate. This means the strychnine separates from the liquid mixture and crystallizes, dropping to collect as heavy insoluble crystals at the very bottom of the medicine bottle.
Oh, that it all sinks to the bottom.
Exactly. Now, if the patient vigorously shakes the bottle before taking every single dose, the crystals are temporarily suspended in the liquid and the danger is mitigated.
It gets mixed back in.
But the sources note a crucial behavioral detail. Whoever poured Mrs. Inglethorpe's medicine was always extremely careful not to shake the bottle, believing it disturbed the mixture.
Wow.
Because it wasn't shaken, the upper doses remained perfectly safe, containing no strychnine at all. But as the bottle was slowly consumed over days and weeks, all of that precipitated strychnine remained trapped at the bottom.
Waiting.
Until she reached the very last dose. That final spoonful of medicine became a massive, highly concentrated, lethal amount of almost pure strychnine.
It is quite literally a ticking time bomb. The murderer didn't even have to be in the room or even in the house when she took it.
They could be miles away.
They just had to sneak into her room, add the bromide powders to a fresh bottle of tonic days or even weeks in advance, and then simply wait for her to naturally reach the bottom of the bottle. It's a murder committed by a chemical time delay.
It is an elegant, scientifically sound, and utterly cold-blooded method. But as Poirot realizes, it still doesn't explain the 9-hour delay on the night of her death.
Right, because she took it hours before she died.
Even if she took that lethal precipitated dose from the bottom of the medicine bottle at her usual time of 7 or 8 p.m., the strychnine should have killed her by 9 p.m. Why did her body wait until 5 a.m. to begin convulsing?
And this is where the household's nighttime habits come into play. She didn't just take her medicine that night. She also had a cup of hot cocoa, which a maid left in her room.
The cocoa is key.
Emily had a habit of waking up in the middle of the night, heating the cocoa over a small spirit lamp, and drinking it to help her get back to sleep.
And this detail provides the missing biological link. Someone deliberately administered a narcotic, a heavy sleeping draught, into that bedside cocoa.
Someone drugged her cocoa.
Chemically, if a powerful narcotic is taken simultaneously with or shortly after a lethal dose of strychnine, the sedative effect of the narcotic will temporarily counteract and mask the stimulant effect of the strychnine.
So they fight each other.
It delays the action of the poison for several hours. The narcotic forced her central nervous system to remain calm, masking the initial toxic effects and artificially delaying the fatal convulsions until the sedative wore off in the early hours of the morning.
The layers of this are just incredible. And there's this fantastic moment in the sources where Hastings thinks he has completely solved the case on his own.
He's so eager.
He's talking to the maid Annie, and she mentions seeing what she thought was coarse kitchen salt sprinkled on the tray next to the cocoa before she carried it up to Emily's room.
Salt on a cocoa tray.
Right. Hastings is practically vibrating with excitement. He pulls Poirot aside and triumphantly declares that the case is closed. He says the salt wasn't salt at all. It was the raw strychnine, and she was poisoned directly via the cocoa.
Poirot's response to Hastings' enthusiasm is wonderfully calm and deeply infuriating to Hastings.
He just shoots him down.
He simply looks at him and says it might have been salt. He flatly refuses to jump to conclusions based on surface appearances or dramatic convenience.
Hastings must have been so annoyed.
This dynamic between the two men is a brilliant illustration of how we process information. Hastings represents the eager sensationalist mindset, the person who grasps at the most dramatic obvious answer because it feels satisfying.
He wants the quick win.
Poirot represents the methodical, analytical mind, the one who demands that every single piece of evidence, no matter how small or contradictory, must fit together seamlessly before reaching a conclusion. A stray grain of powder on a tray is not proof of murder. It is merely a data point to be evaluated.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because you have this core, brilliant chemical trick. The bromide, precipitating the strychnine in the tonic, but surrounding that core truth, is an absolute hurricane of red herrings.
So many distractions.
Almost every single person in this house is creeping around in the middle of the night, hiding their own private secrets, and accidentally doing things that make them look incredibly guilty of murder.
The narrative is densely packed with layered deceptions, and we need to examine them to understand why the investigation was so chaotic. Let's start with Mary Cavendish.
John's wife.
Remember that tiny fragment of green fabric Poirot found caught in the bolt of the connecting door between Emily's room and Cynthia's?
The green thread.
Poirot deduces correctly that it was torn from Mary Cavendish's green landworker armlet. But Mary wasn't the murderer. She was sneaking into Emily's room in the dead of night for an entirely different, highly personal reason.
She was looking for evidence of a scandal. Mary believed that Emily had a document locked in her purple dispatch case that proved John Cavendish, Mary's husband, was having an affair.
She was desperate for proof.
Mary was desperately jealous and needed to know the truth. So she waited until the house was asleep, sneaked through the connecting doors, brutally forced the lock on the dispatch case, and frantically searched for this letter.
And in her panic, when Emily suddenly began to stir and experience the onset of convulsions, Mary dropped the candle she was holding.
Which explains the wax.
Exactly. Which created that large splash of white grease on the floor Poirot catalogued. Furthermore, to ensure she wasn't caught during her illicit search, Mary had previously slipped a narcotic into Cynthia's evening coffee and Emily's nighttime cocoa, guaranteeing both women would sleep heavily through the break-in.
So Mary drugged them.
In a stunning twist of fate, Mary Cavendish accidentally provided the very narcotic that delayed the strychnine's effect.
That is insane.
She was committing a burglary while a murder was silently taking place in the exact same room, entirely unaware of the lethal chemistry unfolding in the woman sleeping next to her.
It's a staggering coincidence, but it explains so much of the physical evidence. And then you have Lawrence Cavendish.
The poet who crushed the cup.
He is the one who deliberately ground the coffee cup into powder on the floor.
Huh.
Why would he destroy evidence? Because he is secretly, desperately in love with Cynthia.
A young dispenser.
Cynthia was the one who poured and brought Emily her coffee that night. When Lawrence broke into the room and saw Emily dying of what he instantly recognized as poisoning, he jumped to the horrifying conclusion that Cynthia had snapped and killed her employer.
He thought she did it.
He crushed the cup to obliterate what he thought was the murder weapon, risking his own freedom to protect the woman he loved.
The psychological motivations for their actions are entirely divorced from the murder itself, yet they perfectly mimic the actions of a guilty party. And we cannot overlook Dr. Bauerstein,
The toxicologist.
Here we have a brilliant toxicologist who happens to be perfectly positioned to understand the exact nature of the poison used, who takes late-night walks around the estate, and who is suddenly arrested by Scotland Yard detectives in the middle of the investigation.
It looks so bad for him.
But he isn't arrested for murder.
He's arrested for espionage, which sounds crazy until you remember the historical context. It's 1917. Britain's entrenched in World War I, and there is massive widespread paranoia regarding German spies infiltrating rural England under the Defense of the Realm Act.
The spy fever was real.
Bauerstein is discovered to be a German sleeper agent. His nocturnal wanderings and intense interest in the local geography were entirely related to his espionage network, completely unrelated to Emily Inglethorp's death.
But it causes massive confusion.
His arrest adds massive confusion to the local police's investigation into the poisoning.
Every single person is hiding something, generating an overwhelming amount of noise that obscures the signal. But the most elaborate, structurally complex deception of all is the deliberate framing of John Cavendish for the murder.
This part of the source material is a masterclass in misdirection. The physical evidence against John is systematically planted to look absolutely devastating.
They really set him up.
It starts with the purchase of the poison. The police discover that someone bought strychnine at the local village chemist's shop just days before the murder. But Alfred Inglethorp, the prime suspect, has an ironclad, unbreakable alibi for the exact time the poison was purchased.
He was seen by multiple witnesses.
He was seen by multiple reliable witnesses miles away escorting a local lady. Yet when the police examined the poison register at the pharmacy, the signature for the deadly purchase is written in handwriting that perfectly, flawlessly matches John Cavendish's distinctive script.
The news tightens further when detectives search the Styles estate. They find a theatrical fake black beard hidden away in a dress-up chest in the attic.
A fake beard.
This immediately suggests a narrative. Someone disguised themselves as the heavily bearded Alfred Inglethorp to walk into the chemist's shop and buy the poison, deliberately trying to cast suspicion on the husband.
And who else but John?
And then comes the absolute nail in the coffin. Scotland Yard searches John Cavendish's bedroom and finds the actual physical bottle of strychnine, the murder weapon, hidden meticulously underneath John's folded winter underclothing in his chest of drawers.
Looking at that evidence, you have the forged signature, the disguise, and the murder weapon in his personal space.
It's overwhelming.
The police are entirely convinced. They arrest John Cavendish for the murder of his stepmother. But Poirot sees the deeper, much more insidious layer of the plot. He points out something that completely upends the police's logic.
It's a brilliant observation.
He asks, if you were trying to frame someone, why would you leave the murder weapon in their drawer? The answer is you wouldn't unless you were trying to frame them second.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the crux of the criminal's genius. Poirot realizes that the murderers wanted Alfred to be suspected initially.
They wanted the police looking at him.
They deliberately fueled the local rumors. They wanted the police and the family to focus all their attention on the obvious suspect, the young, greedy new husband. Why? So that Alfred could be dramatically arrested, endure the public scrutiny, and then at the very last moment produce his unbreakable alibi.
It revolves entirely around the legal concept of double jeopardy. In the UK legal system, if a person is tried for a crime and officially acquitted by a jury, they cannot be tried again for that exact same crime, even if a mountain of new undeniable evidence surfaces later.
It's a huge loophole.
If Alfred is tried and acquitted because he proves he couldn't have bought the poison, he is safe forever. He could literally write a book about how he did it, and the law couldn't touch him.
It is a profound lesson in how information overload and layered deceptions can be weaponized against investigators. The criminals created a scenario where the obvious suspect is proven legally innocent, which artificially forces the frustrated police to look for a secondary suspect.
They need someone to blame.
And waiting right there for them is John Cavendish, whose framing has been meticulously prepared with the fake beard and the hidden bottle. It uses the investigators' own logical progression against them.
It's so manipulative.
Once the first suspect is cleared, they desperately cling to the evidence pointing to the second, ignoring how conveniently it was packaged for them.
Okay, so let's break this down logically.
Mm-hmm.
If Alfred didn't physically buy the poison because of his alibi, and John didn't buy the poison because he was being framed, who actually walked into that shop?
The real buyer.
The grand reveal hidden in Hastings' notes is just staggering. Alfred Inglethorp did orchestrate the murder. He was the mastermind. But he couldn't have executed it alone.
He needed help.
His secret accomplice, the person who actually bought the poison and forged the signature, was the one person in the entire house who publicly, loudly hated his guts. Evelyn Howard.
It is a brilliant psychological blind. Evelyn Howard, the loud, blunt companion who constantly warned Hastings and everyone else that Alfred was a murderer, was actually his secret lover and deeply committed co-conspirator.
They were working together the whole time.
Her public hatred of him was entirely performative. It was a theatrical shield designed to ensure that no one, not the police, not the family, not even the astute Poirot initially, would ever connect the two of them as partners in crime.
She was the one in the disguise. Evelyn has a deep, almost manly voice, and the notes describe her as having a sturdy, robust build.
She put on the fake black beard from the attic.
She wore a heavy coat and a pair of Alfred's distinctive patent leather boots, walked into the dimly lit village chemist shop, lowered her voice, and bought the strychnine, flawlessly forging John Cavendish's handwriting in the register. It is so audacious it borders on madness.
And their plan, complex as it was, would have worked flawlessly if not for one fatal mistake triggered by an entirely unexpected shift in the household's timeline.
A shift in the schedule.
We need to look closely at how a single delayed action unraveled the perfect crime. Think of their plan like a highly synchronized train schedule. The original schedule dictated that Mrs. Inglethorp was meant to take the fatal final dose of her precipitated medicine on Monday night.
So Monday was the day.
So on Monday afternoon, Evelyn, disguised as Alfred, goes to the chemist to establish the fake evidence, planting the flag that Alfred bought the poison. Meanwhile, the real Alfred ensures he is miles away, locking in his ironclad alibi. They expect Emily to die that evening.
But the train goes off the tracks. Emily feels perfectly fine on Monday evening, so she simply decides to skip her nightly dose of tonic.
Just a random choice.
She doesn't take the medicine, so she doesn't die. And Alfred, who is waiting in the house for the screams to start, begins to absolutely panic.
The synchronization is broken. Evelyn is away from the house, successfully establishing her end of the alibi, but Alfred is stuck at Styles and the murder hasn't happened yet.
He's trapped.
He desperately needs to communicate with Evelyn to tell her the timeline has shifted. In an era before instant communication, his only option is to write a letter. So he sits down at his desk in the sitting room and hastily writes to her.
He writes the most damning thing possible. Hastings records the exact text later. Alfred writes, "You will be anxious at hearing nothing. It is all right, only you'll be tonight instead of last night. There's a good time coming once the old woman is dead and out of the way."
He actually wrote that down.
It is a literal written confession of conspiracy to commit murder.
But while he is in the middle of writing this fatal sentence, he hears Emily's footsteps approaching. She has returned to the house earlier than expected.
He is caught in the act.
He scrambles to hide the paper, but his desk is locked and he doesn't have the key readily available to open a drawer. So in a moment of sheer blind panic, he hides the letter in the most obvious place possible. He quickly rolls it up into a tight cylinder and shoves it into a spill vase, sitting right there on the sitting room mantelpiece.
For anyone wondering what a spill vase is, because it's definitely an antique concept, a spill is a tightly twisted piece of paper used to transfer fire from a fireplace to a candle or a pipe to save on expensive matches.
Right, a practical item.
People kept a little jar or vase of these twisted papers on the mantelpiece. So Alfred twisting his letter up and shoving it in with the other papers was a brilliant, desperate camouflage.
And that single panicked act of camouflage unravels everything. Later that same afternoon, Emily is in the sitting room looking for a postage stamp. She checks Alfred's desk, finds it locked, and in a moment of frustration, forces the desk open.
She breaks into his desk.
She doesn't find the stamp, but the disarray makes her realize he was hiding something. She searches the immediate area and eventually pulls the twisted papers out of the spill vase.
She finds it.
She unrolls his letter. She reads the words in her husband's handwriting. She realizes in one horrifying moment that the young husband she dotes on and her most trusted loyal companion are secretly lovers actively plotting to murder her. She's utterly devastated.
So if she found this letter in the afternoon, wait, does that explain the weird detail Hastings noted about her ordering the gardeners to light a roaring fire in her bedroom on an 80-degree day in July?
You've hit the nail on the head. That was the anomaly Poirot couldn't initially explain. Why a fire in the height of summer?
It's burning up outside.
Because the moment Emily read that letter, she knew her current will left her entire massive fortune to Alfred. She needed to destroy that will immediately, and a fire was the fastest way to turn it to ash.
That explains so much.
That was the profound shock she told her maid about. That was why she muttered, "Scandal between husband and wife is a dreadful thing." She burned the old will, and she immediately sat down and wrote a new one, calling the gardeners in to witness her signature, likely leaving her fortune to her stepsons instead.
But the absolute tragedy of the situation is that while she knew they were planning to kill her, she didn't realize the weapon was already inside her body.
She had no idea.
She thought they were going to attack her differently, maybe poison her food later. She had no idea the lethal dose was waiting at the bottom of the medicine bottle she trusted. So, seeking comfort after a traumatic day, she took her evening dose of tonic, drank her sedated cocoa, and the chemical trap snapped shut.
But the physical letter, the confession, was still there. In her shock after reading it, Emily had absent-mindedly torn it into a few pieces and dropped them back into the spill vase on the mantelpiece, intending to confront him with it later.
Just left it there.
The question remains, why didn't Alfred just walk into the sitting room and destroy it after she died?
Because Poirot wouldn't let him. This is where Poirot shifts from being an investigator to engaging in active, aggressive psychological warfare.
He boxes him in.
Poirot deduced early on that Alfred was likely the killer, and he knew that if there was a piece of damning physical evidence somewhere in the house, Alfred would eventually try to retrieve and destroy it.
He would have to go back for it.
So Poirot intentionally fueled the household's suspicions against Alfred. He basically deputized the entire family, turning them into amateur detectives, subtly encouraging them to watch Alfred's every single move.
It was a masterstroke of containment. Alfred couldn't take a single step in that house without John Lawrence Mary or Hastings glaring at him from a doorway.
He was completely trapped.
He didn't dare walk up to the mantelpiece in a public room and start digging around in a decorative vase because someone was always watching. He was paralyzed by the very suspicion he had hoped to use to his advantage.
Poirot kept that intense psychological pressure on until he had secured all his proof, right up until the moment he finally assembled everyone, the family, the police detectives, and Alfred himself in the Styles parlor for the grand reveal.
The classic parlor scene.
And the scene Hastings captures in the sources is magnificent.
Mm-hmm.
Poirot stands there, physically pieces together the torn slips of paper he finally retrieved from the vase, and reads the damning words aloud in front of the entire room.
The sources describe Alfred's reaction as a howl that was almost an animalistic scream.
He just lost it.
The facade of the impassive, deferential husband completely shatters. He lunges at Poirot, crying, "You devil! How did you get it?" before the Scotland Yard detectives tackle him to the floor.
A total breakdown.
It is a dramatic climax, but it perfectly encapsulates the triumph of Poirot's underlying method. He didn't find the killer by chasing the loudest, most dramatic clues.
Not the smashed cup or the disguise.
He didn't arrest the person who crushed the cup, or the person who dropped the candle grease, or the person who wore the green thread. He found the killer by analyzing the quiet, stubborn anomalies. A fire burning on a hot summer day, a biological impossibility in a poison's timeline, and the performative nature of a loud hatred.
So what does this all mean? After dissecting this massive stack of documents, after reconstructing the blueprints and the chemistry and the deeply flawed psychology of the Styles case, what do we walk away with? What is the core truth here?
I think the most vital takeaway is a profound lesson in how we process information, particularly in environments designed to confuse us. In a modern world defined by constant information overload, it is incredibly easy to adopt the mindset of Captain Hastings.
We want the quick answer.
We jump to conclusions based on the most obvious sensational details presented to us. We see a smashed cup or a suspicious disguise or a person who just looks guilty based on our biases, and we eagerly build our entire reality around that initial assumption.
It's dangerous.
But Poirot's methodology teaches us that true understanding requires immense patience. It requires looking at the structural why and how of a situation. It means actively resisting confirmation bias and not letting our preconceived narratives blind us to the quiet, stubborn facts that simply don't fit the story we want to believe.
You have to look at the timeline. You have to ask why a fire is burning in July. You have to ask why someone who supposedly hates a man would go out of her way to loudly, repetitively proclaim it to every person she meets. You have to question the things that seem too obvious.
The truth is rarely found in the noise generated by the crowd. It is usually found in the silence of the anomalies.
That is such a powerful insight. And it brings us to a really fascinating question to leave you with today. Poirot solved this incredibly complex, multi-layered case because he knew that the most damning piece of evidence was hidden in plain sight, sitting quietly in a vase on a mantelpiece, while everyone else tore the house apart looking for complicated, dramatic clues. In your own life, when you're overwhelmed by a complex problem, a difficult decision, or a flood of conflicting information, what obvious truth is sitting right in front of you waiting to be read?
A question well worth considering before your next step.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've enjoyed unraveling this puzzle as much as we have. Until next time, keep your eyes open, question the obvious, and don't forget to check the spill vases.